I've been told by everybody up on this roof that they're all off the roof. I am on the roof of exposure 4. Got fire through the roof of the 5 million, the entire rear section.
Now remember, given the payday, has he been accounted for? Okay. 610B, that was the name date, 610B.
I'm here. We got a fire. 1.5-story, single-family dwelling. Fire shown from the 2nd floor. Give me a second alarm on this.
Up to the top floor, I got people hanging out the top floor windows with a baby.
Commercial building, a lot of fire, a lot of smoke. Go ahead and strike a 3rd alarm on my orders on this.
Got people on the front fire escape here with windows vented below them. We need somebody up there.
Yeah, let them know we got a job. I'm pulling up now. 2nd alarm, I got a 1-story single-family frame. Heavy fire showing from the attic.
So we're using all hands. We got 1 line stretch, fire on the 4th floor, 2nd line being stretched. Primary searches are underway.
Hey, thank you for joining us for another episode of Old School. I'm Chief Rick Lasky, along with my good buddy, Chief John Salka. And John, today again, a couple of guys in class came up and told us how much they're enjoying the podcast. And it's always fun telling them, well, we just kind of roll with the flow and pick a topic. And I know you get hit all the time with folks that are like, when are you going to do another one? What's the next topic? Or whatever. And we've been getting some great feedback on them.
Yep. We never do know really what the next topic is going to be. We pretty much wing it, and wing it sort of sounds like you don't give a shit, because we really do care about what we talk about, and we really do put some thought into it. Sometimes just not a lot of thought. Sometimes we just get together and say, you know what, we got time tonight. Let's grab one. Let's do one. You know, obviously we don't live near each other, anywhere near each other, but we do get together, you know, once or twice a month or every other month sometimes, and, you know, traveling around doing our seminars and doing our training. So once in a while in a hotel, we're like, you know what, dinner was early tonight. Let's get back and let's bang 1 or 2 out if we can. And we would know about how long they're going to be. It's not, what do you want to do tonight? About this or about that? But sometimes like this episode, something happens. Something happens in our lives. Something happens in the world that we want to talk about.
Well, and you're right. I mean, you know, quite often it's like, hey, let's talk about tactics. Let's talk about, I remember the one time I go, what are you talking about, John? You go, how about the K tool? And 35 minutes later, we're done talking about the K tool.
Right.
But like you said, every now and then you and I end up talking during class. Like here we are in Newport, Rhode Island with great people, another great fire department, Mimi from CSU, another great company, Officer Academy. And then we start talking in class about mentors and people who have impacted the fire service. And we hit on Chief Alan Brunacini and Chief Tom Brennan, talk about Jack McCassin and Tommy Schervino, and golly, so many incredible people.
Tom Kennedy and Leo Stapleton and Pete Lund. I mean, it goes on and on and on and on.
Oh, on and on and on. And then, you know, I've asked you to tell this story. Actually, we've talked about the gentleman that we're going to talk about here for this particular show. I can't tell how many times I brought him up in classes. I know I lead you all the time.
Many times.
When we talk driver operators, the chauffeur, right? We talk hydrants. We talk knowing your district. We know knowing the job, being into the job, and
training
all that.
The probie.
And every time we talk, and I lead you down that path, I say, John, tell the story about, and you bring up whose name?
Willie Tracey.
Oh my God!
Willie Tracey.
And Willie just passed away.
My God! Unexpectedly, suddenly, Willie Tracey passed away about 2 weeks ago. 63 years old, born 1958, same year I was born.
Well, let me ask you, because before we get to some of the things we talk about in class, talk about Willie. When did you first meet him, and then your working relationship in the FDNY? Willie was a chauffeur. Well, he was a firefighter,
right,
and became a chauffeur. But explain that whole process, and then how you met Willie.
Right. So of course I met him when I became the captain of 48 Engine. I had never, I knew a couple of guys there. Mike Wilbur was actually my connection to 48 and 56
in the Bronx.
In the Bronx, and Mike Wilbur was actually a truck chauffeur in 56 truck, and so that's how I got to know of the place. And then of course when I made captain, I went up to the Bronx, meaning I chose that division as a place for me to cover around and fill in spots and eventually look for a home, and I did. And then 48 Engine was open, I believe, when I got there. I don't think I worked very many shifts, and all of a sudden I was there UFO until further orders, meaning you're there and you got the spot basically, not on paper, not officially, but nobody else is looking for it. We need somebody to be there, take the spot and try it out and see how you like it. And of course I loved it. was a busy place. There were over
Who
6,000.
was there right then? Do you remember who was there, firefighter wise?
Yeah. There was a lot of great guys there, both in the engine and truck. I've mentioned Dominic before. Obviously, Willie was there. He was one of the senior chauffeurs. Danny Vito was one of the guys that was on the roster, but he wasn't around. He was on light duty or coming back from an injury. He was one of the older guys and a regular chauffeur that eventually when he came back. After I said, who the hell is this guy, Vito? And eventually I met him, and he's a great, great guy. And a whole host of other guys. Andy Fredericks was there. Yeah, my friend, good friend, Billy McGinn, who was with me in Squad 1, who was with me in 11 truck. Now, Billy was with me again in one
of your instructors at FDIC for our Firefighter Safety Survivor program.
Billy. Yes.
And we lost Billy.
Lost Billy on 9/11, along with Andy. They both left 48 eventually. Actually, around the same time when I left, I got promoted to battalion chief and I left. And then they both left when they created the new squad.
For 18 squad, right?
For Squad 18 down in downtown Manhattan. So I had all these wonderful, great guys there. And it was a great run at Firehouse. It was a tough shop. It was, over the years they've said it, and it was true. It was one of the toughest kitchens in the job. One of the toughest places to just exist every day. It was a tough, rough and tumble place. You got no thanks for nothing. Nobody gave you an inch for nothing.
If you came in super sensitive.
If you came in, you picked the wrong place. That's right. And there's people nowadays in the modern fire service, in the modern world, in the modern culture saying, oh, you should never be uncomfortable anyway. You should do this, you should do that. And listen, I fully agree. The fire service is different now than it was back then, but we're looking 35 something years ago. It was a long time ago, and it was full of good firemen. That was, of course we called them firemen back then. Good guys on a job. They could put a fire out anywhere, that group. It was tough. And like lots of places in the Bronx and in the FDNY, a lot of guys went from the engine to the truck. So there was a lot of senior guys. Back then, they were just mainstream guys that were there 3, 4, 5, 6 years, not senior yet. But they were all guys that used to be in the engine. So the engine would get the probies. Guys would stay a couple of years. I'm going to go to the truck. And I did it myself, So a lot of guys were there for a really long time. 3 or 4 years of engine in the truck, or in the engine, and then they would transfer to the truck. So then 10 years later, they get 15, 18 years, and they've been in both companies. There was always a good working relationship, but always a little competition, like any good firehouse, I think anywhere, not just in the FDNY. And Willie, when I got there, Willie was a chauffeur. Willie was already one of the guys. I don't want to call him a senior man yet, but he was one of the guys with time on a job that was, as we say, screwed into the front seat.
For the engine, chauffeur for the engine.
A seated chauffeur. They use that term in the job, a seated chauffeur. At least we used to. Meaning he's the regular chauffeur. Every time he comes to work, he gets in there. Unlike most fire departments around the country, or let's say lots of them, an FDNY chauffeur is not a rank. It's not an official position. Now, you do get a little bit of money because the union managed to get that years ago, and they have a nice little stipend. If you work, you get the code for chauffeur. And if you're a regular guy and have the seat, quote unquote, every shift you work, you get the seat. Every shift for the whole year. And it adds up to thousands of dollars. So you end up getting a pretty decent raise. Not a decent raise, but a very nice one. And Willie was one of those guys. Willie was one of the guys in the front seat. He was a cigar smoker. Always had a cigar, or often, let's say. And but he wasn't an old guy. He wasn't an old timer. He was a good young guy, full of spirit, I understand he was a great firefighter on the nozzle. He was a great guy on the line.
When he passed, obviously there was a lot of pictures posted of him. And I saw some pretty kick-ass pictures of him on some lines at some big fires.
Yes.
I mean, not like we got a room and contents. I'm talking big jobs.
He had a very good reputation as a great firefighter, a great engine firefighter. Willie Tracey had no interest in being in the truck or working in the truck. He was an engine firefighter. He was sort of like Mr. Engine 48. That was long before I got there. I just jumped in there for a quick spell as an officer, stayed a couple of years as the captain and, moved on, studied for chief and made it and moved on. Somebody came after me, but he was there for the long haul. Well, he was there for the long haul. Now recently, as I just said, at his wake, I went to his wake over in Westchester County, about 40 minutes from where I live. And God, it was tough seeing him. He's still so young. I mean, he's my age. He's me, And then I find out from a couple other guys that are there. We're sitting there in the back room. They were doing honor guard. So there was 5 or 6 or 8 guys around with uniforms on, taking turns going up there, standing on both sides of the casket. And I find out he came from, I believe it's 302 engine, which is where a couple of the other knuckleheads came from 48 and 56 too, including Phil Pillay and another guy who came from that same outfit down there in Brooklyn. They were looking to go somewhere. I guess a couple of them got together and said, "Hey, look at that place. Let's go there." You know, and they picked it and they all came over. That was news to me. I was on a job over 30 years and I'm retired 10. And Willie was one of my favorite guys in 48. And I didn't know that he came from somewhere else. Not a big deal, but it's an interesting fact. And, because he was looking for more work. I think that 302 place wasn't terrifically busy,
And you guys got just a wee bit of work in 48 engine.
Oh, just a wee bit. And Willie was there before I was. He was there when it was even busier. He was there when the work ratio was even higher.
So let me set this up a little bit here. We're talking back then, if I remember you telling me right, well over 6,000 runs a year. I know you guys were doing jobs sometimes all day long, and just a busy place.
Absolutely. A busy place, busy with everything, busy with rubbish fires, busy with gas leaks, busy with fires, busy with second due, busy with third due, busy with, a couple automatic alarms, car fires, cars onto the railroad tracks, crashes, medical calls, kid in a box, hit by a car, we were just running around. Like I remember Mike Wilbur telling me a story one time, and I'm sure it happened to Willie and a lot of other guys. Like Mike Wilbur said, he came into work one night for a night tour. We do days and nights in the FDNY. Even when we hook our tours together, day and night together to work at 24, a lot of times it starts in the evening. So you come in for a 6 p.m. start. And Mike Wilbur said he came in a couple of times early, like 4:30, 4:45. And just as he's walking through the door, beep, boop, a run's coming in, for the truck. Mike was in the truck at the time. And he'd see a guy. The guy would say, "Mike, grab this for me. I got to get going." Okay. And he'd grab his gear and he'd jump on the rig. He was a firefighter. At the time, he wasn't a chauffeur. And he said he would jump on the rig and out the door they would go at 4:45 p.m. in the afternoon, an hour and 15 minutes before the 6 o'clock shift. And they'd come back to quarters at 7:45 p.m. And they weren't at a job. They were at a car fire, another car fire, a food on the stove, two EMS runs. I mean, not quote unquote EMS. We didn't do an EMS back then, but you get called to kids hit by cars and falling off bikes. And he'd do 12 runs between 4:45 and 7:45, and they would come back hours later just from a run and a second run and a third run and a fourth run. And sometimes you pull up to the front of quarters, getting ready to get back in, drive away, another run, And Willie was there. Willie was there for all of that. And he was one of the rising stars.
So one of the all-stars for sure. Because, I've stolen that story from you, a couple of stories when I'm not teaching with you, just to emphasize the importance, the role of the driver operator. And you and I just did a show not too long ago, and we've mentioned Willie Tracey several times in this podcast, several times our Fire Engineering, the Command Post podcast. Oh my God, in class all the time.
Every company officer academy that we teach around the country, we talk about him.
And for a solid reason.
Because he's the officer's dream.
Oh, so all right, there you go. You just did it for me. Why was he the officer? Captain Salka, I've met a ton of your guys. They loved working for you. I know you go, yeah.
Not all of them.
There was a bunch of them I met that loved working for you. Tell me, how does somebody get to be the officer's dream for Captain Salka at 48 engine? I mean, what does that take?
I mean, first of all, it has nothing to do with Captain Salka. That's my opinion. And it's true. Willie was, the captain's dream, the officer's dream. But he was that before I got there.
I saw people commenting on the Facebook feed after his passing. Oh my God, what a great chauffeur. What this? You couldn't ask for a better guy.
Mr. 48 engine.
He was an officer's dream. So go ahead.
And he was. Because you know what? He took care of everything. This is old news. There's no groundbreaking news here. This is old news because he took care of business all the time. He was always in early. He was always faddling, tinkering around with the rig. Always. You couldn't find him sitting in a chair watching TV. You couldn't find him sitting somewhere drinking a cup of coffee, relaxing. I don't know if I ever saw him anywhere, but on the apparatus floor or maybe in the kitchen for dinner, always out there, adjusting something, fixing something, taping something, painting something. He was always working on the rig. I don't know how he did it. I love telling this story, right? So I say, doing a lot of runs like we were doing. Eventually, they built me a little fold-down bunk in the first floor office.
So you'd have to go upstairs,
right? But let me go back to the upstairs days. So I'm laying upstairs. I walk upstairs. The truck officer and the engine officer actually was the same bunk room upstairs. The bunks were like Ozzie and Harriet with a little nightstand in between, And when I got there, I was like, this is a little odd. Me laying in a bed and then a table between us, and the other guy laying in a bed next to me, engine officer, truck officer. And it was a pretty decent room. And on the other side of the room, they had all the lockers set up in like a square, and you could step, and one of them was missing. So you step in there and you were in the middle of all the lockers. Let's change this. So we did. We changed the lockers, and we changed the lockers so they faced in two different directions. And I put one bed on one side, one bed on the other side, because I was the captain of the engine. I was, I could sort of do that. And it worked out really good. So let's jump back to the bunk room. So now there I am. We're doing, 6,000 plus runs a year. I didn't get undressed. I always had my button-down shirt on, always had my collar pins on, always had my belt and my keys hanging off and my trousers and my black socks. I never wore white socks in my life. I still haven't. And I might kick my shoes off because there was no getting undressed there. You were just going out again and again and again and again. So I'd take my shoes off, lay on top of that, tuck under the blankets. An hour later, 15 minutes later, 20, beep, boop, run comes in. Step up, slip into my shoes. I always had the slip in nap shoes. They were like welder's shoes. Slip into them shoes, out the door, into the hallway, boom. The pole hole's right across the hall. Jump on that pole, slide to the apparatus floor, black. No lights on yet, even. The house watchman was still just arising from his comfortable position, right? Of course, there was enough lights on the apparatus floor at night, even to see where you're going. I would zoom right over to the chief's car was right there next to the house watch, deputies. And then was the engine. Truck was on the far wall. I'd go right over to the engine, zip over to my side, grab the door handle, open it up, boom, the rig starts when I pull the door open. Wasn't mechanically able to start.
You almost thought that you were.
It was almost like I opened a door and it had a switch on it. No, it was Willie. It was Willie. And this isn't once, it wasn't twice, it was every time. He's sitting in the seat. I swing the door open. I'm still rubbing the sleep out of my eyes. And I look in, there's Willie in the driver's seat, in the chauffeur seat, hands on the steering wheel, cigar in his mouth, lit, with smoke coming off of it, saying to me, let's go, Cap, we'll first do. I don't know how he got there. I know he wasn't sleeping in the seat. I don't know how he got there. That's just one story about Willie. He was always the first guy in a rig, start the rig up. And I wasn't a real hard nose, but one guy missed one run when I was there for the years I was there. One guy missed one run. I don't need to say his name. When Willie was there and started the rig and I got on the rig, obviously we're not going to drive out without anybody, but the guys there knew, and it was one of the things you tell the probies when I got there, hey, we turn out quick here. If you're not on the rig when the captain and the chauffeur are ready to go, another guy, you're going to miss the run. And Willie was always on there ahead of me.
Before we get to like hydrants, as a driver operator, as a chauffeur, we've talked about how important this is to know your rig backwards and forwards, to know why the water hits an impeller a certain way, everything about that rig. That's one thing. What about his knowledge of that borough of 48 engines? Still, I mean, his knowledge of the streets, buildings, everything about was incredible.
Another great thing. So I'd be jumping on a rig day, night, whatever it was. He'd be in there, and he didn't have to really prod me. Let's go, Cap. But he was always looking at me like, let's go. I was never on a rig ahead of him. I can tell you that, right? So I'm climbing on a rig. He's like, okay, yeah. With third due or second due or with third due, whatever it was, because you're first, second, third due, sometimes even fourth due for some far distant boxes like the VA hospital, Veterans Hospital. We'd be like fourth due there. We know we were going to do anything unless a plane crashed into it or something, but you were still fourth due, and we still went to park at one of the hydrants right outside the main gate in case we had to lay a line in or something like that. But he'd be telling me, he'd be saying, Cap, we're third due up there, and there's a hydrant out of service on that block. And I'm saying, the hell is he talking about? How does he know that?
This is not your first due.
This is not my first due. This is not my second due. This is my third due area. And he's telling me, while we're still sitting in the firehouse, that there's a hydrant out of service on that block. Like he passed it yesterday. And maybe he did. Maybe he passed it on the way to work. Maybe he passed it on a run on his last 24. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe his brother works there. I don't know. But he knew that there was a hydrant out of service on the block that we were going to, that we were third due at, which means we might go there, 5 times.
Did he know I mean, he could tell you buildings, right? Address, say, that's this building.
Hey, Cap, that's the project right next to the auto parts store. Or that is the auto parts store. Let's go to the auto parts store. I can pick up the stuff I ordered.
I got one for you. Okay, I've heard you tell this story, and it kind of along the same lines here about using the deck gun and all that stuff.
Oh, that's a great story.
About you pull it up and go.
Oh, this is a great story. So those of you that are officers, now you don't even know Willie Tracey, but you don't have to. Imagine your show for something, but this is a Willie Tracey story. It's great. So we're driving, we're going somewhere, we're taking a box in somewhere, and now we're getting reports. It's a job, numerous calls, you're going to work, blah, 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 3-2 squad and rescue coming in, 10-4, 48 engine, order battalion, whoever they were calling, doesn't matter. And now we're rolling up, and now it is a job with a first due engine. And as we're rolling up, if I remember, it was one of the streets right near quarters, 189 or something like that. And it was a little bit of an uphill. We were going uphill, just a slight rise going up. And the fire was on my side of the street. It was a one-way street, as a matter of fact. Fire was on my side of the street. And as we're rolling up, it's a frame. It's a frame-like house, 2.5-story house, nestled between like a 6-story tenement on the right-hand side and maybe a 2-story frame building on the left-hand side. And as we're rolling up, this thing is roaring. It's roaring. And as we're rolling up, I'm thinking deck pipe. Let's use a deck pipe right away. We can hit the window frames that are starting to burn on the tenement, and we can hit the frame building next door, keep it in one building. Yeah. We're going to stretch a line too, but let's a quick little knock. Exactly. So as we're rolling up, I'm thinking, oh, okay, Willie, stop right here. Stop. And he keeps rolling. Willie, stop right here. He keeps rolling. I look at him. I said, Willie, stop. And he's just looking at me. He's looking past me, actually. He's looking past me. He's looking at me, but he's looking out my window. And he's got the cigar smoke coming up. And he stops. Okay, we're good. And hits the brake. Off the rig I get with the line, pull a line. My guy start pulling the line. And all of a sudden I hear the motor revving up. And sure enough, what is he doing? He's got the deck pipe going. I was thinking deck pipe, but he saw that there was a truck parked right next to us. I was paying no attention to the truck because I was looking at the fire.
You were thinking let's stop.
Deck stretch pipe. The line. Let's stretch the line. And he's worried about, hey, Cap, later on, I said, Willie, what was that about? He said, Cap, I wouldn't have been able to use the deck pipe if I would have stopped where you said stop. We could have stopped anywhere along the whole front of that building. And the line came off fine, right? But where I finally stopped, the deck pipe was past the truck. And now I could hop up there, swing it to the right, use it on the building, knock a lot of fire down on the exposure. And you guys still could stretch a line. You didn't even know what was going on. When you were telling me to stop, the deck pipe was right next to a box truck on the right-hand curb. And the stream would have had to go over the box truck. We would have never seen it. So while I'm yelling, I'm raising my voice, stop. He was shaking his head, okay, Cap. And then he stopped when he damn well felt like it, because now he knew he was in the right spot. He did me a favor. He did everybody a favor.
So you're talking about a guy that was into the job, showed up, made the rig before anybody else, knew the rig backwards and forwards, knew the streets, knew the buildings, knew tactics and strategy, knew what to do. You said the officer's dream as a chauffeur, as a driver. So one of the stories I always ask you to share, where I'm going with this, it's the whole hydrant thing.
Right.
I remember when you came to Louisville, when I first got there and you taught, when you left, some of our drivers were embarrassed because they'd go on automatic fire alarm. They would get out. If there's no smoke, they're like, well, we're here. It's automatic fire. We're leaving. Right. After you left, they're out. They're flushing hydrants, doing stuff, EMS calls. And all of a sudden, we're like the water department's wearing us out. What are you doing? You're busting. Well, we're fine. These hydrants, they didn't just break. We just missed them.
Right.
And now all of a sudden, the guys were checking them because water is everything. Water is everything to us. To an engine. Water is everything. I mean, let's get real about that. And then you left. And then, so we talk about this in class. And you mentioned it before about, there's a hydrant not good and all that. That story actually. So you're going somewhere. He's checking. I mean,
let me give you the whole thing. Let me give you the whole thing. So here he is. He's the chauffeur. The rig is his. The rig is his. Castle. Right. He knows everything about that rig. Where everything is. Willie was the guy that put an old paint can. It might have been even a plastic can.
I like that, by the way.
An old paint can full of grease with a little paintbrush in it.
I like that. The rig is his castle. I like that.
Yeah. Oh, it was his castle. And he had that can with some grease in it and a thick grease, heavy grease. And he would have a little paintbrush stuck in there too. You didn't even have to have a top on it. It wouldn't spill. It wasn't liquidy. It was like paste.
Right.
And anytime we checked the hydrant, anytime he checked the hydrant, anytime we used the hydrant, he would never put the caps back on until he ran that grease around the threads and typed that. Like he was a one-man hydrant maintenance unit.
Flush it
for the whole area. Flush it or use it. Make sure that the drain was working. You have to look in with a flashlight and make sure that the water was going down. The drain is way down under the sidewalk somewhere, right? And if it was good, he'd let it drain. You don't want to put the caps on too tight too early, because actually that could cause suction, and the water would stop draining. Because if you put the two caps on tight and it's a good seal, the water would stop draining. Right. So he would let it drain way down.
Good point for some of our newer driver operators.
Absolutely.
Don't put the caps on too.
Absolutely. So that's just the grease thing. But here's the test on the hydrants thing. So obviously, like I've said in class, and anybody who works for the FDNY knows this, and I would hope that there's some other fire departments that do something similar, but we did semi-annual hydrant inspection. Twice a year, every hydrant was turned on. I mean, I think I said today there was 1 million hydrants. I don't know how many hydrants there are. There are so many hydrants. It's like there's a number. I don't know what it is, but it's 100,000 or 10,000.
It could be 50 million with as many as you have.
Every hydrant in New York City is tested twice a year by the companies, by the field companies, at both engines and trucks. Even trucks have hydrant districts, hydrant inspection districts, and they have a map with each picture, an overhead map with the hydrants identified with the numbers next to them, and you go out and check them off. You know, you also would check them off as you went through them. Guys just walking down a block, checking. You get a whole 2 or 3 or 4 blocks done sometimes in an hour or two. And if they found a defect, then that would get written down, and that would get submitted by the officer. Nowadays, I'm sure it's all computer based. Back then, it was a form that you'd fill out and mail in. You're not mail in, but you know, drop it. And DEP, Department of Water Supply, would fix the hydrants and then send a message back that hydrant's fixed. We'd go out again and check it to make sure it was. The bottom line is that's the semi-annual hydrant inspection. And of course we did that just like everybody else. But every run we went on, and I'd like to think 60 engine and 71 engine and 28 engine, all over the job, 69 engine, all the great companies and not so great companies. Everybody's supposed to be checking hydrants on every run. But Willie took it to the next level. Not only did he check a hydrant on everyone. I mean, we could be at a gas lake, he checked the hydrant. We could be at order of smoke, obviously he's going to check the hydrant. We'd be in gear standing at the back step waiting to stretch a line, right? We go to medical calls. Well, I was the captain of 48 Engine is when the FDNY adopted and officially became CFRD, Certified First Responder with a Defibrillator. It was the official, and EMS actually became a bureau in the fire department. EMS used to be a separate agency. Giuliani was the mayor. He took the housing police and the transit police, disbanded them, threw the patches away, the badges away, no more chief, and made them all an agency, all part of the NYPD. And he did the same thing with the fire department and EMS. He took EMS, ambulances that said NYC EMS, green uniforms or a large patch, threw it all away. He made EMS, he disassembled that agency and made it a bureau of the FDNY. So now we're going on EMS runs. Willie didn't care what kind of run you were going on. You went on an EMS run, we went up to the 3rd floor, apartment 3B, for a guy having difficulty breathing. We bring the oxygen up there, the defibrillator, whatever. I come down, there's a wet spot next to the hydrant, right there across the street, wherever the rig was. When Willie was driving, the rig always stopped at a hydrant. A fire engine that's not parked at a hydrant is a taxi cab. It's not a fire engine. You know what I'm saying? He would always park it at a hydrant, and he would always test the hydrant. And I swear to God, some days we did 20 runs. Some days we did 25 runs. Willie on a couple of shifts in 1 week could test 100 hydrants just on runs. Never even connect
and
to one.
And be able to tell you, like you said, you're not even out of the building yet. You're not in the firehouse yet. He's telling you there's an out-of-service hydrant on that box.
Oh, if there was out of service or busted, we knew about it. And if it wasn't, he didn't even mention it. Didn't even mention it. I just looked and saw the wet spot and on the rig we got, and off we went. It was just a silent duty that he performed on every run. And I'd like to think some of the other chauffeurs did it too, and they probably did it. Danny Vito probably did some of that too. We had all great chauffeurs there because they all knew how important the water was.
And talk about, while we still have some time here, what he did for the probies. I mean, 2 a.m, whatever.
Another great story.
Hydrant knowledge.
Another great story. So another thing we had was, we were on 187 and in the Bronx, 187th Street, Webster Avenue, main thoroughfare, right? North of us, just north of us, was Fordham Road, where Fordham University is. Big, beautiful Ivy League school in the middle of Shittsville. And north of that was the rest of the 7th Division. And we would go up there routinely for second alarms, for second alarm fires. And if you went much further than that, you started to hit other cities. You started to hit Yonkers and New Rochelle. We had Yonkers and New Rochelle adapters in our rig. And Willie was the guy that put them on the door. So you'd open the compartment door where the adapters and where other pieces, appliances were for water delivery. And on the door was Yonkers, and it was painted red. And New Rochelle, which was painted green. And there was a couple of others up there as well, because there was 2 or 3 other cities up there that we could possibly run into and did routinely. I worked at several fires. I have a picture on my wall at home right now. And in that picture is I was the captain. Shennefield was in that picture. Willie's in that picture. Andy Fredericks is in that picture. 2 guys now from that picture are gone. And it was up at a fire up in Yonkers, a big 3rd alarm that they called us in. They called the deputy and 2 engines and 2 trucks. And Willie was one of the guys. He was one of the architects of that compartment, of how everything was laid out. This is New York City Fire Department. We don't have fancy compartments. We don't have fancy display drawers that you can pull a drawer out and look at all the different, fittings and adapters. It was stuff we had to do ourselves. take a piece of wood, couple of 2x4s, and make it so you could drop these these adapters onto a piece of 2x4, and they would be visible, and they wouldn't get all mixed up in a bucket somewhere at the bottom of the compartment. So he was Mr. 48 engine. He knew where all that stuff was. If he didn't actually design it, he helped do it. So back to the Proby now is what we started talking about. I'd come down at midnight, or we'd come back from a run. I'd put the run in, in the office. Now it's midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. I come out of the office to walk to the back of the kitchen, maybe to get a quick bite to eat or a donut or a half a cup of coffee. And there's Willie on the apparatus floor at the rear compartment or the front compartment. The compartments are open, and him and the Proby are there. And the Proby's either standing there or kneeling down with him, looking at something, looking at the multiversal, looking at fittings, looking at one of the rolled up, looking at a nozzle. Of course, nothing I had to do about it. I would just glance over and see it. Sometimes I'd walk over and catch him doing something right, catch him doing something good. And most of the time I didn't. And I'd see him the next morning. We'd be talking. I'd say, hey, I saw you with the Proby there last night. He said, yeah, you know what, Cap? I was ready to run up, and he asked me a question about something about the nozzle. I guess he must have had a job earlier in the day. I didn't work today, but he asked me about that. So I wanted to show it before I forgot about it. I said, well, listen, that's a home run. Any time spent on Probys is worth its weight in gold. So he was an instructor. He was the maintenance man. He was the driver operator. He was the water resource guy. He was everything. He was
your GPS.
He was everything. You didn't need a GPS if Willie was driving. Sometimes I was pulling out of corners. I'm thinking to myself, we're going to go left or we're going to go right here. You know what I'm saying? Out the door we go. You know what I'm saying? And whether you like speed or no or this or that, he was always a careful driver. Never had any incidents or accidents with him. And man, oh man, could we get the boxes? We used to compete a little bit with 75 engine, getting into boxes, and very rarely did Willie come in second.
So how about 2 a.m, you're coming back from a run and you're like half asleep because you've been running, and the rig pulls over. You tell this story.
Great story. So we're coming back like from a third due box, maybe even fourth due, like the VA hospital, right? A little bit of a ride. So it's 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning. I got up out of bed. I'm sitting in the rig. We're driving back. You sort of like being on a bus commuting somewhere. All of a sudden I'm out. Not everybody can do it, but I can. I can sleep on the way back from a run. And all of a sudden, I feel the rig pull over. I'm like, holy shit. I wake up, got back fast. We're not back. We're 20 blocks away from the firehouse. We pulled over on the side of the road. I'm like, Willie, he's out of the rig already. What the hell is going on here? I look out. He's pulling a Proby out of the side of the rig, saying, come here, look at this hydrant. He sees a hydrant with a locking device. Over the years, people abused and broke and turned hydrants on and waste water and, hurt pressure. And so New York City, the FDNY, the water department, they put different types of security devices, locking devices where you need a special wrench that has a magnet in it and all this other nonsense. Anyway, at one point, there was 2 or 3 of them out there. So you could look at a hydrant. Very few hydrants had nothing on top. Most of them had 1 or 2 of the predominant security devices. So he's pulling a Proby off saying, check this hydrant out. All right, look under my seat. If I wasn't here or if I was doing something else and I told you to turn a hydrant on, which hydrant wrench would you grab? And I'm listening. Now I realize what he's doing. He's giving a Proby a little quick test on the street, 2 o'clock in the morning. Which hydrant? And it wasn't like pull this one out, try that one, try that one. Oh, no. Which wrench is it? Don't touch the wrong one. And he was on top of these Probys to make sure they knew what was going on, that they could just reach in and grab the right, the one with the magnet, the one with I forget the exact names of them. I used to study and remember every dimension about them when I was studying for promotion. But the point is there was 2 or 3 different ones. Some of the hydrant wrenches had 3 things on them. If you picked the right one, you could do any hydrant. Had one in the middle, one at one end, one at the other end. And the Probys all did well because Willie, like I did, and the lieutenants and the other firefighters, Proby's got a lot of attention and they got a lot of training, and anybody who's going to wear the 48 is going to know what they're doing. And Willie spent a lot of time and energy doing that.
Well, one of the things we've talked about before, we mentioned Andy, our good friend Andy, and that Andy's been gone 20 years now, and people are still learning from Andy Fredericks. Willie Tracey, we did a show on legacy once, Leaving Your Legacy. There's a guy whose legacy will live on forever because there are people's lives he touched in the FDNY that it's that whole ripple effect that they've touched so many other lives. That guy's going to be around forever, even though he just passed.
Absolutely.
He will be around forever.
There are officers out there. There are guys who are lieutenants, captains, battalion chiefs today that were fellow firefighters with Willie, and he did study for promotion and he did get promoted. Willie Tracey was a lieutenant when he retired. He got promoted to a lieutenant. And after 9/11, I forget what he was doing out there, covering a different couple of spots. I think for a while he might have been in the ceremonial unit and helping with all the funerals and stuff that were going on. But Willie was a lieutenant. Matter of fact, when I went to his wake, in his casket, along with him laying there, looked like he was sleeping. In his casket was his World Trade Center medal. I think a couple of his unit citations they had stuck to the back wall of the casket, you know, and the nice white material there. And his white lieutenant's hat was resting on the pillow, you know, over his left shoulder, you know. And you're right. A lot of guys that worked with him went on to be officers and obviously leave 48 and leave the Bronx and go elsewhere. And hopefully, and I know it's true, hopefully some of them learned some stuff and picked up some great habits that he taught them. And they've probably passed on to a generation or two of other people. Yeah.
Pretty amazing guy. You know, I know like we said, we start off by saying we've talked about him. I've led you down that path so many times about Willie Tracey because there's so many great things to learn about.
And they're great stories. Great story. What a great example he was for the guys that worked for him. And he stayed there so long, he actually worked through a couple of different generations of guys as well.
Yeah. I mean, just absolutely wonderful. Like you said, a captain's dream and a company officer's dream on that engine, Mr. Engine 48.
Yep.
So let's finish this off. We've done this before. We did it with Timmy Klett, one of our favorite people and one of your favorite company officers, lieutenant off 88 engine, you know, the whole be more like Tim. If we're sitting around, you know, right now we're in Newport, Rhode Island with some great people, like we said. Let's say you get to sit with the new chauffeurs class or someone who's aspiring to be a chauffeur, a driver, engineer. And in your head, you're thinking, Willie, what would you tell to the new guy or gal that's going, what can I be? What do I have to do, Chief Salka, to be successful at driving my engine or to be like Willie Tracey?
And that's a great question. And the answer is very simple. If you treat the job, meaning the job of being a chauffeur, being the engine company chauffeur or the MPO or the motor pump operator, right? A couple of different terms we used over the years. You have to treat that engine and that job that you have as the most important job on the fire scene. There's a lot of people there, especially in the FDNY. There's a lot of people there. 3 engines are rolling up, 2 trucks, aerial ladders are being shot to the roof, tower ladders are going up, people are supplying water here and there, chiefs are pulling up, additional units. I mean, it sometimes fires look like a zoo. They look very confusing, even though we know what's going on there. But you got to remember that one of the most important people at that job is the guy standing at the pump panel of the first engine. He's got to secure a good solid water supply. He's got to get his crew there safely so they can stretch that line. He's got to charge water, get water into that line as quickly as that officer calls for the water. He's got to be ready to handle any problems, a burst or malfunctioning supply line. He's got to be able to, a burst line in a hose line, the attack hose line is stretched, also a burst blank there. He's got to be able to throttle stuff down. He's got to be able to give you a boost of water and tell you how much you got left while you're using it. If there's a delay in getting a supply line into it, there's so many things going on. And who really is more important in the big scheme of things than a guy standing at the pump panel with a baseball hat and a cigar, turning them valves and making sure that there's a good water supply coming out of that first engine, putting that fire out where there's civilians and firefighters above it, maybe people trapped in a fire apartment, maybe fire spreading to the adjacent buildings. All of the stuff, the success of the whole structural fire operation really does depend greatly on that first hose line. And the first hose line really does depend greatly on that guy or that gal, whoever it is standing at that pump panel delivering the water and knowing what to do.
And we've said that before. Like you just said, the guy or gal at that pump panel can make or break that whole incident. And
absolutely,
it's not just like you said before about hooking up and looking up and not doing nothing or whatever. We've done a show before, the role of the show, just to say, wait a minute, you know, when people would say, what would you ask them? So what'd you do at that fire? What'd you do that job? Oh, I just drove. I just pumped. Really? That's all you do is just pump? And then you and I go on for an hour about the impact they had.
Oh, there's so much we didn't talk about. Oh. Willie was even the greatest second due chauffeur. We pull in second due to some other company, to another company who's got a line stretch ready with a second due engine. That's like work hard and get no credit. That's like work hard and nobody even knows you were there. And Willie would be the guy watching and listening. If they were having trouble, all of a sudden I'm like, I go over to the first due engine chauffeur. He's at the hydrant. He's having trouble. I said, what? You got water 79? He's like, I don't think so. I don't think so, Cap. Hold on a second. I'm like, a 4.8, the 4.8 chauffeur. I got it, Cap. I got it. I look around. Beep, beep, beep. He's backing down the block with my engine because he already heard that going on. He's going to drop a line and drive out of the block and connect to another hydrant somewhere. And I didn't even tell him to do it. He was paying attention because he knows second due engine. Got to be sure they get a good water supply in that first due engine. It just never ends.
Incredible guys, you know, folks at that firehouse. But Willie Tracey, what a legacy! What a great guy! What a great person!
Great member of the FDNY and 48 engines.
Just incredible. I'm glad we took some time. I'm glad when we sat around later, on the day, and we talked about Willie, and that picture popped up. We're like, we ought to just talk about him. Let's just.
It's a tribute. It's a tribute for a great guy that was never into getting credit or studying for boss to be a big chief or something like that. He always just worked hard doing his job. Loved the guys around him, and always gave 100% on everything. And us talking about him tonight, I think, is a tribute that'll live forever. You know what? Someday, a year from now, maybe they'll replay this, or maybe it'll appear in a book someday when we outline all these programs or something. But I'm glad we got it down and talked about him now that he's passed.
And the impact he's had on you, I could hear it in your voice.
Yes.
The excitement in your voice tonight. Talking about Willie, during this show was kind of cool to sit back and watch you enjoy talking about.
I worked with a lot of great guys in this job. I was in a lot of great companies in the squad and 11 truck and Rescue 3 and 48. And let me tell you, Willie's at the top of the pile.
Outstanding. Remembering Willie Tracey. Let's call it that.
Willie Tracey.
Willie Tracey remembered. We'll do that.
Yep.
All right. So if they want to get a hold of you, best email?
ChiefJohnSalka@gmail.com.
And are you guys still doing the coins for these?
Yeah, we still are doing coins. You can contact me at that email. We'll talk about coins. We're putting up a monument in Washingtonville where I live, and where we put a monument up after 9/11 for the 5 guys that died from my little town on 9/11. And now we're losing a couple of guys to post 9/11 illnesses, including another great friend of mine, Ray Phillips, whose name is going to be first on that new monument that we're building. We're selling $20 20-year 9/11 commemorative coins. A little pricey, but all the money's going to
every penny
to building that monument.
Well, and speaking of coins, I'm very proud. My volunteer fire department, Wichita West Fire, in Texas, we're doing a fundraiser for a new pumper, and we're the guys and gals are out doing everything, man. We're from pancake breakfasts to fill the boots to everything else. We've got a challenge coin we haven't made up, so I'll just say this real quick. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, or on Facebook, Wichita West Fire. All right, Wichita West Fire. Reach out to Chief Ryan Fetzer or Captain Chris Bashford. They're $10 the coin. At all is go. We're doing that as one of the many fundraisers towards our pumper. If you want one, it's a pretty cool coin. A lot of people bought from them on this trip. So reach out and we'll be happy to take care of you. Great. Get me at chieflasky@gmail.com. And that's it, buddy. That's another great show.
Great. Absolutely. Thanks for listening, folks.
And we end all of our episodes with a very important statement is please keep the men and women in our armed forces in your thoughts and prayers. And especially today more than ever, and the wonderful topic and the great guy we talked about. Never forgetting means just that, never forgetting. See you next time. Be careful and God bless.